But meaning alone is never enough to rebuild what inconsistency failed to protect over time. They are now left with reflection, regret, and a growing awareness of everything that was left unfinished. And you are left with growth, clarity, and direction that did not exist before. Between these two emotional states, the distance becomes obvious without needing explanation. You are no longer in the waiting phase of your life. You have stepped into the building phase. And that is why this message is not about pulling you back into something that no longer matches who you are, but about confirming the internal shift that has already taken place inside you. Stay with this, because this realization changes everything moving forward. But meaning alone is never enough to rebuild what inconsistency failed to protect over time. They are now left with reflection, regret, and a deeper awareness of everything that was left unresolved. And you are left with growth, clarity, and direction that was built through experience, not assumption. Between these two emotional states, the distance is no longer hidden. It is visible, it is felt, it is real. You are no longer in the waiting phase of your life. You have stepped into the building phase. And that shift is not temporary, it is structural. It changes how you think, how you respond, and how you allow people into your emotional space. This message is not here to pull you backward. It is here to confirm what has already changed inside you. Stay with this, because what follows is not about the past anymore. It is about the awareness you carry now. This connection was never designed to survive on meaning alone. It needed consistency, emotional responsibility, and a stable sense of presence from both sides. Without that, even strong connection begins to weaken slowly, not through one moment, but through accumulation, through delays, through silence, through emotional hesitation that repeats until it becomes distance. And that is exactly what happened here. You did not leave in one emotional decision. You adjusted gradually. You responded differently over time. You stopped overextending in places where your effort was not matched. You stopped explaining yourself repeatedly just to be understood. And without announcing it, you started protecting your own emotional balance. That shift was quiet, but it was powerful. As they look at you now, they are starting to understand something they missed before. Strength was never about holding on to someone who is inconsistent. Strength was about recognizing when emotional effort is no longer mutual and stepping back without losing yourself in the process. And in that realization, they are seeing you through a different lens. You are no longer the person who stays confused and keeps trying to fix imbalance alone. You are the person who noticed the pattern and chose peace over emotional uncertainty. That decision did not come from anger. It came from clarity that slowly developed over time, and that clarity cannot be undone easily. They are still stuck in mental loops of what if, replaying conversations that could have gone differently, moments where they stayed silent instead of speaking, times where they delayed honesty because it felt easier in the moment. But now those memories feel heavier because they are no longer neutral memories. They feel like emotional consequences that they can clearly see. They are realizing that the silence between you was never empty. It was filled with every avoided conversation, every delayed response, every emotional withdrawal. For a long time, they believed access to you would always remain open. But now they are understanding something different. Emotional access is not permanent when it is not respected. That realization creates discomfort inside them, because now they are no longer just behind in timing, they are distant in presence. And distance that grows through emotional inconsistency does not behave like something temporary. It becomes permanent in structure, even if feelings still exist. At the same time, they are beginning to see your strength more clearly than before. How you handled confusion without becoming bitter, how you maintained your dignity without lowering your standards, how you slowly stopped giving unlimited access to your energy where it was not valued. That was not emotional weakness. That was emotional intelligence forming through experience. And now they feel the contrast between what you offered and what they failed to offer. The urgency they feel now is not just regret. It is fear mixed with realization. The fear that you are no longer emotionally available in the same way. Not because of distance alone, but because of inner calm. And calmness in this context is powerful. Because calmness means the emotional storm has already passed inside you. It means clarity has already formed. It means you are no longer reacting, you are observing. And that shift changes everything. They are beginning to understand that your peace is no longer dependent on their actions or explanations. And that is what unsettles them deeply, because when someone no longer needs emotional stability from you, your place in their life naturally changes. At the same time, they are being forced into a more honest self-reflection. They cannot fully rely on external excuses anymore. Not timing, not distance, not misunderstanding. They are seeing their own emotional absence more clearly now. They were not consistent when it mattered most. They did not show up in the way you needed at the right time. And that truth is no longer avoidable. You were not asking for anything excessive. You were asking for presence, consistency, honesty, and respect for emotional effort. These are not extras. They are the foundation of any real connection. But those foundations were not maintained. And now the absence of them is fully visible in the space between you. Meanwhile, you are no longer operating from emotional dependency. You are no longer waiting for clarity from someone inconsistent. You are building clarity within yourself. You are responding with awareness instead of confusion. And that is why this situation feels completely different now. Because once awareness replaces confusion, the old emotional cycle cannot restart in the same way. And that is the reality they are now facing. This connection was never something that could survive on meaning alone. It required consistency, emotional effort, and a safe space where both people felt seen. Without that, even deep connection starts to weaken slowly over time. You stepped away from that unstable emotional space the moment you realized your needs were not being met in a steady way. And as time passed, that absence of effort became more and more visible on both sides. What once felt unclear has now become something defined. A distance that did not appear suddenly, but was formed through repeated silence, hesitation, and emotional imbalance that built up quietly in the background. As they look at you now, they are beginning to understand something they did not fully grasp before. Real emotional strength was never about keeping someone attached while they wait for change. It was about recognizing when a connection is no longer being nurtured and choosing yourself without losing your sense of value. And in that realization, they now see you differently. You are no longer the version of yourself that stays in confusion or overextends just to keep things alive. You are the version that noticed imbalance and decided to protect your peace instead. That shift did not happen loudly. It happened through quiet decisions, boundaries, and internal clarity that reshaped how you show up emotionally. They are still stuck in moments of what if, replaying conversations, replaying missed chances, thinking about where they should have been more honest, more present, more consistent. But now those memories feel heavier because they are no longer just memories. They feel like consequences that are clearly visible. They are beginning to understand that the silence between you is no longer just a pause in communication. It has become a reflection of every moment they pulled back, every time they avoided clarity, every assumption that things would stay the same without effort. For a long time, they believed emotional access would always remain open. But now, they are seeing something different. You did not simply set boundaries, you rebuilt your entire emotional space. That realization creates discomfort inside them. Because now they understand they are not just delayed, they are distant. And distance created through time does not behave like something temporary. It becomes real, structured, and noticeable. At the same time, they are beginning to recognize your strength in a way they previously overlooked. They can see how you handled inconsistency without bitterness, how you maintained emotional dignity without losing yourself, and how you slowly stopped overgiving in places where effort was not returned. That was not weakness. That was emotional maturity in action. And now they feel the difference between what you gave and what they failed to give back. The urgency they feel is tied to something deeper than simple regret. It is the fear that you are no longer emotionally reachable in the same way, not because of anger, but because of calmness. And calmness in situations like this is more powerful than reaction. Calmness means something has already settled internally. Closure is forming without needing words. They are beginning to realize your peace no longer depends on their actions. And that realization is what unsettles them the most. Because when someone is no longer needed for emotional stability, their role in your life changes completely. They are no longer central. They are becoming part of your past understanding instead of your present emotional world. At the same time, they are being forced into a more honest reflection. They cannot rely on excuses like timing, distance, or misunderstanding anymore. They are seeing their own lack of emotional presence more clearly now. They were not consistent when it mattered most, and that truth cannot be avoided anymore. You were not asking for anything extreme. You were asking for consistency, honesty, presence, and respect for your emotional effort. These were the foundation of stability, not extra demands. But those foundations were not maintained, and now the gap created by that absence is fully visible in the emotional distance that exists today. Meanwhile, you are no longer operating from that old emotional pattern. You are not waiting for clarity from someone inconsistent. You are building clarity within yourself. You are responding from awareness instead of confusion. And that is why this situation feels irreversible in its old form. Because once someone steps out of confusion and into clarity, they no longer return to the same emotional cycle. And that is the shift they are now facing in real time. I have a message from someone close to you, and it feels very important. Before you continue, slow down for a moment, because what you are about to hear comes from distance, silence, and hidden emotions that were never fully spoken. It feels like something inside this situation has shifted, as if time itself behaves differently when feelings finally start rising to the surface. This is not random. Something has changed in the emotional background of this connection. Hello everyone, and welcome. And before we go further, stay with me, because what you are about to hear may change the way you see everything. Don't skip ahead. Listen carefully till the end. Your person has been carrying something inside for a long time, much longer than they would ever openly admit. This did not begin recently. It has been building slowly underneath everything they showed on the surface. Even when they acted normal, even when they seemed unchanged, they did not simply forget you. They did not wake up one day and stop feeling. What actually happened is that they pushed their emotions down because they did not know how to deal with them. And when emotions are pushed down instead of expressed, they don't disappear. They stay alive in silence, and over time they grow heavier, more intense, harder to ignore. What is coming through now is not calm or stable. It feels like emotional pressure, confusion, and inner discomfort building up inside them. Your person is not fully at ease. There is a restlessness they can no longer fully ignore. Something recently triggered this change. It could have been a memory, a place, a word, or even a quiet moment where distractions stopped working. And suddenly, you came back into their thoughts with force. And this time, it did not fade quickly. It stayed. It kept coming back when they were alone, especially at night when everything goes quiet and the mind has nothing left to hide behind. In those moments, something uncomfortable started to grow in them. The fear that they might actually lose you for real, not temporarily, but in a way that cannot be undone. This realization did not come gently. It came in waves, in silence, in empty moments. When they checked their phone and nothing meaningful was there. when they tried to feel normal but could not fully connect with anything. Stay with me here, because this part is important. They are slowly realizing something they avoided for a long time. No one else feels like you. No one else responds the same way. No one else brings that same emotional comfort they once ignored. And now this realization is not peaceful, it is painful, because the urgency inside them is not only love, it is also fear. Fear of losing something they did not value enough while it was there. If they could speak without pride, they would admit they should have acted differently. They would admit they thought there would always be more time. They believed your presence would stay, no matter how inconsistent they were. But now they understand something deeper. Silence creates distance, and distance, when it grows long enough, starts to feel permanent. And once it feels permanent, regret begins to speak louder than pride. They are also seeing another truth. Doing nothing was never neutral. It was still a choice, and that choice had consequences. It slowly changed the connection between you and them, even if they did not notice it at the time. Now they feel regret for not showing up when it mattered, regret for not speaking when clarity was needed, regret for choosing silence instead of honesty. At the time, staying quiet felt easier, safer, more controlled. But avoidance always has a cost, even if that cost arrives later. Your person struggles with expressing emotions not because they do not feel deeply, but because they feel too much and do not know where to place it. So they withdraw, they delay, they stay silent. But emotions that are ignored do not fade away. They grow. And now they are facing that truth, whether they are ready or not. What is not faced inside eventually shows up outside, in life patterns, in outcomes, in what you gain and what you lose. And now they are starting to feel the impact of things that were never fully addressed. Not in one sudden moment, but slowly, in subtle realizations that something has changed and cannot be ignored anymore. One of the hardest parts for them is seeing that you are not emotionally where you used to be. They can feel it without needing words. Your energy is different now. Your responses are different. Even your silence feels heavier than any disagreement ever did. You may still care, but you are no longer waiting in the same way. You are no longer chasing explanations that never came. You are no longer staying trapped in confusion. You are no longer offering unlimited emotional space without receiving clarity in return. And that shift affects them more than they expected, because they were used to your patience. They were used to your understanding. They were used to your emotional presence even when they were not giving the same back. And now that is gone, or at least no longer available in the same way. What they once took for normal now feels missing. The emotional safety they had around you, the ease of connection, the feeling of being understood without having to explain everything again and again. And now they are beginning to understand something they avoided before. Not every connection can be replaced. Not every emotional bond can be recreated in the same form. And that awareness brings discomfort, even fear, because what they are losing is not only your presence, but the emotional stability they felt when you were there. And now they are left questioning themselves in quiet moments. Did they ruin something meaningful without realizing it? Did they delay too long? Did they assume your patience would always remain? These thoughts do not come once. They repeat, especially when they compare how things are now with how they used to be with you. And nothing feels the same anymore. This is where urgency slowly builds inside them, not because they suddenly became different, but because they now see that time does not wait. If they do not act, something may close quietly between you, not in a dramatic ending, not in a loud moment, but in a silent emotional shift where your attachment simply weakens. And that kind of distance is the hardest for them to accept. They think about reaching out. They think about explaining everything. They think about apologizing in a way that finally feels real. But fear holds them back. Fear of rejection, fear that it is already too late, fear that your feelings have already moved beyond where they once were. So they hesitate. Messages are written and deleted, words are rehearsed in their mind but never spoken, and while they stay stuck in hesitation, the emotional weight inside them continues to grow. Stay with this for a moment, because this part matters. At the same time, something has also shifted in you. You are no longer in the same emotional place you used to be. You are not reacting from confusion anymore. You are not staying inside the same cycle of uncertainty. You are starting to see things more clearly now, even if slowly. And that clarity changes everything. They replay old memories, but now they feel different. Not through hope, but through loss. They remember your patience. They remember your effort. They remember moments where you stayed understanding even when it was not returned equally. And now those moments feel heavier to them than they ever did before. They are also realizing something they ignored earlier. You were not asking for perfection. You were asking for presence, for consistency, for emotional effort that matched yours. And that is what was not maintained. Now they stand at a crossroads. One path feels easier because it avoids vulnerability. The other path requires honesty, responsibility, and emotional exposure. But that is also the only path that could possibly repair what has been broken. The difficulty is that this step is not just about reaching you, it is also about facing themselves. And that is the part they are still struggling with the most. They are beginning to understand that loss becomes clear in stages. First, it is a feeling, then awareness, then reality. And they are somewhere in between awareness and fear right now. And if you are listening closely, you can probably already feel it too. These were the moments where honesty could have come through, where clarity could have been spoken, but instead, silence was chosen. And now those silent moments feel much heavier than they felt before. It was never truly about not caring. It was about fear. Fear of opening up, fear of being misunderstood, fear of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, fear of losing control over how they were seen. So instead of speaking, they stayed quiet. And instead of facing things directly, they kept delaying them. But time does not forget what is avoided. It only stores it, and now those unspoken moments are no longer small. They feel large inside their mind because they can clearly see how each silence slowly created distance between you. Stay with this, because this is where everything begins to make sense. They remember that you did not leave suddenly. There was no single loud ending, no dramatic exit. Instead, you slowly adjusted. You adapted to what was being given to you. You stopped filling emotional gaps that were never being filled by them. You stopped over-explaining yourself. You stopped over-giving your energy just to keep things stable. And without announcing anything, you started protecting your own peace. That change was not loud. It was quiet, controlled, and deeply intentional. And that is what they are noticing now. They can feel that you no longer lean in the same way. You are not trying as hard to be understood. You are not pushing for clarity with the same emotional intensity. Instead, there is a calm energy in you now, a grounded presence, and that calmness unsettles them more than conflict ever did, because calm does not look like confusion. Calm looks like certainty, and certainty usually means decisions have already been made inside. They are starting to realize they can no longer rely on your confusion to keep the connection open. You are not emotionally stuck anymore. You are standing in self-respect. And that changes everything in this dynamic. They are also afraid to reach out because deep down they know something uncomfortable. They are not fully ready to show up differently. They may want to say they cared. They may want to explain themselves. But they are beginning to understand that words alone cannot repair what behavior damaged over time. And that is where they feel stuck. One part of them wants to stay hidden because it feels safe. The other part wants to grow. But growth requires discomfort, honesty, and responsibility. And right now, they are sitting in that in-between space without knowing how to move forward. Stay with this moment, because this is the turning point. There is something painful they are starting to recognize. You were not just someone in their life. You were also a reflection of what they could have become emotionally. And instead of stepping into that version, they stepped away from it. Now that reflection feels like something they lost. They are realizing that when growth is delayed, it does not disappear. It simply becomes heavier when it finally returns. And now they are carrying that weight. At the same time, they are noticing something else about you. You did not fall apart the way they expected. You did not stay emotionally frozen in the same place. You adapted. You healed in your own way. You chose yourself in ways they did not fully notice at first, but now cannot ignore. That is why their perception of you has shifted. You are no longer the same emotional version they once knew. They are also realizing they cannot return to you with the same energy they left with. Half effort no longer matches who you are now. Emotional inconsistency no longer fits your standard. And that gap feels very clear to them now. It creates inner tension because they do not want to return unchanged, but they also do not yet know how to fully change. They are aware, but not fully transformed. Reflective, but not fully consistent. Emotional, but not fully ready. And that gap keeps them stuck. Meanwhile, you are no longer in that same emotional position. You are not waiting in confusion. You are observing more clearly. You are thinking differently. And that clarity makes the situation feel completely different now. Because once someone steps out of confusion and into awareness, the old pattern cannot fully return. Not in the same way, not in the same form. But meaning alone is never enough to rebuild what inconsistency failed to protect over time. They are now left with reflection, regret, and growing awareness. And you are left with growth, clarity, and direction. Between these two states, the distance becomes obvious, almost undeniable. You are no longer in the waiting phase of your life. You have stepped into the building phase. And that is why this message is not about pulling you back into the past, but about confirming what has already shifted inside you. You are not the same person who waited in confusion anymore. You are the version who learned from it, understood it, and evolved beyond it. And that changes everything that comes next. Stay with this, because this is where the shift becomes permanent. This connection was never something that could survive on meaning alone. It needed consistency, effort, and emotional safety. Without that, even something deep starts to weaken over time. You slowly removed yourself from that unstable space when you realized your emotional needs were not being supported. And as time passed, that absence of effort became clearer on both sides. What once felt uncertain has now taken shape into something defined, a distance that did not appear in one moment, but was created slowly through repeated silence, hesitation, and emotional inconsistency. And now, looking back, both sides can feel it clearly. As they observe you from a distance, they are starting to realize something they did not fully understand before. Real strength was never about keeping someone emotionally attached while they wait for change. Real strength was about knowing when to step back, when emotional effort was no longer being matched or respected. And in that realization, they now see you differently. You are no longer the person who waits in confusion or keeps filling emotional gaps just to maintain connection. You are the person who noticed when something was not being nurtured and chose yourself instead. That decision was not loud. It did not need drama. It happened quietly through choices that protected your peace. And that is what they are now trying to process. They are still going through moments of what if, replaying conversations, replaying missed chances, thinking about where they could have been more honest, more present, more emotionally available.